basis of this, we've got these 5 recommendations that have been highlighted as a result of this study. The first one, the importance of relationship-based interventions to ensure that person-centred engagements underpin the planning and the development of any services. The second one, the importance of investing time in the initial stages of engaging an older person. The recommendation is just to make sure that significant time is invested in developing the relationships with the beneficiaries of any programme. We have number 3, the importance of working in partnership with older people to ensure that beneficiaries have authentic ownership of the programmes, from having a leading voice in planning services through to delivery and also evaluation. Number 4 is to consider the dual pathways to individual befriending or to engagement in groups and social activities. And that's an issue that is being discussed at quite some length with a number of different forums about the needs that people may have for individual one-to-one contact. So it's something that we're considering in quite a lot of detail. What is the best way to deliver that? What's the sustainable way to be able to deliver that kind of support? And then number 5, factors that promote sustainability, to ensure that sustainability is a founding principle of all the work with the groups, investing time in motivating groups to instill confidence in their ability to run their own groups. There are 5 of the recommendations that we've got. And I think maybe one of the ways to maybe kick off the discussion would just be to ask if anybody within the room has got experience either as an older person or as somebody who has run services that feel that their experience has chimed with what you've seen today in the presentations. So, and what I was going to say was, if you want to speak, just raise your hand and we'll get over with you with a roving microphone. So would you like to say a few comments? And this is a very open forum, and you can say precisely what you wish.
I'm trying to keep this as brief as I can. I don't have 20 questions, I just have 4. The first one would be, how do we involve different social groups, such as people who are not a service user, who have dementia, or there's an age gap, or minority groups. I suppose I'm thinking about yesterday on a bus, there was another deaf woman, and she was silent, and because I know sign language, I was able to hold a conversation with her. And I mean, I just felt like, she just needed that time. And I don't think there's enough time, to be honest, spent with older people, and it's really not good.
So I suppose the issue that you're picking up there is that that person maybe needed a bit of time just to be able to help make their way. This is the perennial issue of buses. Is Damien here? I think we've got Damien from City Council was here earlier on. It's an important issue. I don't know if anybody has any comment that they'd like to make just about investing time. Kiva. I'm
going to just move. Oh, by the way, hi. I used to teach her, so it's really lovely that she's here. I'm going to go back to how do you identify these people and then how we bring them in. And what the Hope Project did was because it was looking at people who were specifically excluded. Because oftentimes with projects that are based in community development, and I'm sure a lot of you have had this issue, where the people that come to one group come to another group. So you've got people who are very engaged, and then you've got people who aren't engaged at all because of complex needs. And this is why the Hope Project specifically targeted excluded people, and it did it through referrals from social workers, doctors, and family members. So people who traditionally wouldn't have been found, those people with those complex needs that you are talking about, people who traditionally would have been excluded. The area of investing time is really important, as you say, because like we said, the idea of it was that you would have someone that is referred by their social worker, by their doctor, by a family member. So they're known as someone who is lonely. It is very hard to target socially isolated people because they're socially isolated people. So by getting that sort of referrals was great. And then we would have our Hope Development Officer go and visit them and encourage them to come out. The issue that we had, as I mentioned, was that you just had people for whom that was far enough, that had been socially isolated for so long or had particular complex needs, because you've got someone who speaks entirely in sign coming to a group like that is not necessarily going to be particularly helpful for them. So this is why the recommendations maybe having dual pathways. So you can get people who maybe have been isolated and can go to that sort of group, or you have people who are isolated for whom that sort of group is not suitable. Dementia, issues with hearing, issues with sight, and maybe we need to find a separate pathway for them, be that befriending, be that going to a group with those people with those particular complex needs. So it was something that was inbuilt to the project at the start in regards to identifying the socially isolated people, and it's something that is being built on in the recommendations in ensuring that those complex needs are met.
Okay, what happens to those people who are not identified? And how do we address some of the fears that older people might have in terms of being institutionalized, of being stereotyped, and as just basically as an older person, just being treated like, oh, you're just an older person, we just put up with you. How do we change? How do we change that?
Okay, so I think one of the points that you were making was how do we find people who are maybe experiencing loneliness? And that's a very big issue and a very big question. It's something that is being discussed at all levels, you know, within the community and the voluntary sector, within organisations that are involved in public policy and providing services. But I think that it's something that has to be tackled and addressed at a ground level, neighbourhood and community level, because I think that we've all got a role to play. I don't know what the complete answer is. I think we know that there are different ways and different strategies that you can take. We had a conversation with a hairdresser up on the old Hollywood Road who said when some of their people come in to get their hair done, they'll mention that that's the only person that the hairdresser is the only person that they've seen all week and the only conversation that they've had. So we're trying to look at themes and strategies. But would anybody from the floor have any comments or feelings to make about how to address people who are maybe hidden, people who are hidden? Oh, Grace is going to, we'll come to you, Grania.
Hi, Elizabeth Byrne, Alzheimer's Society. Just struck by your question about travelling on buses, and you mentioned people with dementia as being particularly, at risk of social isolation. I'd like to say that Alzheimer's Society has done a lot of work with TransLink to raise awareness of dementia and also to improve people's communication in terms of, understanding the condition and what works and what doesn't. And that has been a huge boon for people, say, travelling on public transport. I'm an advocate for public transport myself, but I just think that that can just break down one barrier, and the one barrier might be just going into town, say, if you have dementia and your family carer is coming with you. One of those barriers can be when you go to get your ticket or you put your pass on the thing, and somebody who understands something about your condition and is better at communicating can just slide things on nice and neatly. I've seen it really well done by TransLink staff, and I've seen it not so well done. So it proves that people can learn and they can become better at communicating, and certainly, being aware and understanding more about the condition really does work.
Okay, thank you. Grania wanted to make a comment. Grania is one of the people who was involved in the Cullen Tree programme. Grania.
As you know, Eamon, I've been with the Hope Project from the very beginning. I've been one of the volunteers for quite a while with yourselves. Now I'm actually doing domiciliary care. I go out to people's homes, and the very first thing they say to me, you're the first person I've seen since yesterday. So what I was thinking, could there be a possibility of saying, getting into the GP practices and get referrals from the GPs, so that we can, if a number of people are coming in depressed with illnesses that don't even exist, but they're dreaming them up because they want to go out and talk to somebody, would it be possible to set up inside a GP practice one particular person, 1 day a week, so that the GP could transfer, recommend that person, yes. And that person will have all the information of what's going on, or how to alleviate loneliness.
That's a very interesting suggestion, and something that I think we address to a varying degree. Does anybody here work within a GP's practice, or a community practice nurse, or somebody who goes out as a practitioner on a regular basis? This is the bit I'm looking at. I'm looking at what I know maybe works in community. I was wondering, what is your experience as a professional, just in terms of how do you identify but also how do you identify where to refer that person to? What are the challenges that you face?
Well, my name's Pam Borland. I'm with Older People Services in Belfast Trust. And I suppose we have, first of all, just to comment on how useful this morning has been. I found the information very helpful, and the style of presentation has been really engaging, so thank you very much for that. In Belfast Trust and Older People Services, we have, I suppose we take referrals from anyone who feels that they would wish to have an assessment. As part of that, we would ask that our staff are engaging with the person with the wider context of their environment, with who's important to them, and through that start to identify and address issues as they arise. And that's not something we can do in isolation. Obviously, there's lots of other agencies and groups involved. And the recent development of the Connected Community Hub that the Trust are linking into is, I think, helping the Trust to engage in a much wider context and ensuring that we're not trying to fit square pegs into round holes, that we're looking at people as individuals and trying to work out with them what's out in community and what part the Trust plays, but also, more importantly, what will work for them in that context.
Okay. And I see that we have got a domiciliary. I was going to ask about your own experience. We've got a domiciliary physiotherapist with us today. Martin, if you could provide the microphone over to... Sorry, what's your name again? To Emma. Emma is a domiciliary physiotherapist working in the East Belfast area. What's your experience, Emma?
So people get referred to me obviously primarily because they have a physical issue as opposed to problems with isolation and loneliness, but quite often the two come combined together, sort of which comes first, chicken or egg, type situation. And it can be quite difficult for us. So obviously I go in for a limited period of time. I'm trying to improve their mobility and get them back out and about again. But it's where do they go whenever I have to finish? And I have this issue as well that was also identified by the development officers, where people just enjoy me coming because they just want somebody to talk to. So they don't necessarily do much in the way of exercise or activity for me, but we sit and we have a good chat, and psychologically they find that beneficial, and it's quite difficult then when it comes to the end of that. And I have to say, there's really no further reason for me to come. And they're asking me, well, can you not just come, because I would quite like to just have a chat with you, and that's not something that I can continue to offer. So the reason why I'm here today is to try and find out a bit more about what's available in the community, because it is quite difficult working within the Trust to know what there is, because I don't live in this area either, so it's quite difficult to know what's going on in an area that you're not actually physically involved in. So a big part of why I'm here is to try and sort of see what's out there and where I can send these people to whenever I've reached the end of my journey with them.
So, but Kiva, you wanted to make a comment about this.
Yeah, I'm so loud. There's just a couple of wee things, and one, just what you said there really struck with me, because there's a piece of research I did a couple of years ago, and it was looking at training older people with visual impairments and using iPad technology, and it involved me going to someone's house sort of every week, and there's a few of them who got it really quickly, and then we just used to sit and watch like Judge Rinder, and it was brilliant. And when it came to the end of the research, my having to go, you're trained, and I have to, that is a very difficult thing. So I really empathise with you when you are going, that is hard, and I know it's very hard for the development officers. But the thing I actually wanted to say was about, there's also something about, there's how do we identify lonely people or isolated people, but also there's something important about the stigma of loneliness, where people don't want to admit that they're lonely. And you may find this when you are going into people's homes, and it came up briefly with one of the development officers, where even when you're going into people's homes who've been identified as nobody, darkens their door, they're lonely, they're coming to the doctors just to talk to someone. But when they go to the person's house, go, oh yeah, I've got friends come around all the time, and my son comes around once a week. And it was only, I remember one in particular, she was going, oh, my son would drop in most days a week. And she'd left a note, this development had left a note for the son, could you make sure such and such a light bulb gets changed or whatever. When she came back the following week, this note's still there and the light bulb hasn't been changed. So there is something about how do we identify lonely people, but how do we get lonely people? And maybe it's something about pride of not wanting to say my son doesn't ever come to visit, even though I raised him. But how do we get lonely people to go, do you know what, the reason I'm coming to the doctors is because I'm sad, because I need support. And that needs to come into, and I'm an academic, I don't have the answers to anything, but I don't have the answer to this, but I think it's part of the conversation we need to have, is how do we reduce the stigma of loneliness to the point, and I think it's possible, because there's certain, we look at things like depression, anxiety, and these are things that 10 years ago nobody would have talked about having depression. Now we are having quite an open conversation about mental health, so I don't think it's impossible to change this about the stigma of loneliness, but I think it's something that's really important in this whole conversation.
Yes.
Hi, can I just check, myself and my colleague, we would work in a community centre, and we would work with a number of older people's groups. We have a men's group, and we have a dance group, and we have a number of mixed groups. But it's incredibly difficult to get new people to come and join. And we've tried all sorts of ways. We've said to people, bring a friend, bring a relative. We've talked to the children's groups that we work in and sent notes with them to get their parents to tell their parents. We've asked the housing executive if they could identify older people in the area, and with GDPR and all of that, nobody will pass on information. So it's incredibly difficult to actually, we have, there must be about 5 groups in our centre, all of whom are crying out for new members. And we've tried to get them and we can't get them. And then there's also that issue that if you do identify people, well, one is obviously a lot of this stuff is very high time and resource, finance based, very difficult. But some of it is also then about transporting people. And it may only be 5 streets away, but how do you physically get people to get? So, there are things out there for people and people looking for people.
That's a very useful comment. I see at the back of the hall, we'll come back to people who have their hands up, but I see at the back of the hall, Elma Greer's there from Age Friendly Belfast. We'll come to the other table after Elma, but Belfast City Council and Age Friendly Belfast is involved in quite a number of initiatives to try and get different agencies and people speaking to each other. I think it might be useful, Elma, if you just say a little bit about the citywide group in isolation and loneliness and the way that we're seeking to reach out to people.
Yes, there's been a group meeting for about a year and supported through Age Friendly Belfast, because we do recognise that while there's fantastic services out there and groups, sometimes the people who need them most aren't going or attending. And there's 3 things we've identified. One was to look at how do you talk about loneliness and how do you train people up to be able to link people in and not say that word that puts everybody off, but actually makes it attractive for somebody to join something. The other thing is maybe looking at, I suppose it sounds silly, but or complicated, but a referral pathway. But it might be just taking examples of some of the things here, and people like the police and the ambulance service talk about people who phone them all the time, but it's not actually maybe about the thing they phoned. They are very isolated, but it's actually trying to put our heads together and say, what do you do in a situation like this, and test that out. And the other thing is then to support campaigns, get people talking about it and interacting on buses or wherever. So those are 3 things that we've highlighted over the next year. The campaign to end loneliness, I don't know if Fiona's here, and they have quite a big project through the lottery to do campaigns, and they are taking quite an intergenerational stance on it. And it is important because that link with both children, sometimes children can disarm you in how they just make new friends, but also for younger people as well, because it is highlighting that the need for people to interact with other ages as well. But we do also recognise that transport is an issue, and we're trying to work on that. It is quite difficult sometimes. One of the things we found is that the service people get on transport is improving. There's been something like a 7% change in how happy older people are on the transport they get on, I suppose, primarily the buses maybe. But it's still only something like 70%, so 30% aren't happy, and there's a lot of work still needed to do on that. So we're very happy for people to link in on it, and we're trying to really chip away at it.
Okay, Elma, thank you very much. Lorna, you wanted to say something.
Just very briefly. Is this working? Yeah, sorry, just very briefly. I'm picking up the point earlier from the domiciliary physio. A study I was involved in a couple of years ago, and there was an indication that professionals maybe weren't aware of all of the resources that are available, and it was very difficult to actually get some kind of list or resource for people to actually know what is available. I know there's been a lot of work done on that, but there's still, I suppose, maybe a gap between what is out there and what other people are aware of.
Thank you, Lorna. So from the table at the back.
No, you don't need to.
Yes, I'm going to speak on behalf of the seniors over 60 that's in this room. I don't want to know about all you're getting around. We have no place to hang out, to go to. And I lived in Canada, and what we did there was a senior centre in every radius of a council. There was jigsaw puzzles, there would be card tables and that. And that made it friendly for anybody who reached that age of loneliness, of losing their partner or divorce, to walk in. There was the newspapers to read, there was coffee to read. And even me, coming from Belfast, you met loads of people. But here people won't do that because it's all fractioned by this hub, which I don't think really works, because then you have the community centres and they have a few little groups, but there's no gathering of people. And they go once, it's cliquey in the area, they don't talk to you, so you won't go back. And you sit at home and read a book and watch TV all day. And that, if you have the outgoing things of even through the library, that is preventative for your illnesses of anything that can come down from stress, loneliness. They're the things that are rocking our NHS.
That's very, very important. Very good comments to hear. There's a gentleman at the front who was going to say something. You want to?
Well, I'm not from Belfast, but I can say this, that I think people from Belfast are very aware of their neighbour, and I think that they're to be commended for their humanistic approach to people. There's big cities like what I came from, like Toronto, where people really do not have the love and care for other people like they do here in Belfast. And I heard of a case in Germany whereby a pensioner was found dead in his flat. Now that's not unusual, except this person had been dead for 7 years. So here, to be a good neighbour, which a lot of Belfast people are, good neighbours. There's some bad ones, true. But I think in general, people do care about others. I mean, I remember walking down Bedford Street when I came here from Canada, and it happened to me, and I'd been used to the big city of Toronto where you don't get involved in other people's problems. And what happened as I walked down Bedford Street, this young girl took an epileptic fit and lay on the ground, and her mother was with her. And I just walked on by because that's the way you do it in Toronto. You just don't get involved. And the next thing you know, a lorry stopped in the middle of Bedford Street, and the truck driver, he jumped out of the truck, and another man ran out of a furniture shop and got her a chair and sat her down, brought her a glass of water. And afterwards I thought to myself, you know, big city life must have really affected me. It was Belfast. These people responded to people that were in trouble.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Diane wants to make a comment.
Yes, I'd like to ask if anybody knows about the social prescription.
It would be an opportunity. We've got Daniel Jack here from the Connected Community Care Hubs. So wondering, Daniel, would you like to respond and just tell us about what services you're currently aware of?
Yeah, it probably goes back to the point that the lady made earlier about the pathway for the GPs. So there's a new service, and my colleague here alluded to it as well, Connected Community Care, and that really is a single point of access for GPs to connect their patients in with community services, assets and resources. So it's a single point of referral. It's now open to all GP practices across Belfast. It's gone live the last 4 months. I think we're sitting at around 300 people have been referred into the service. It's also been open to community social work teams as well, and we're hoping to roll it out to different health professionals as well. And it's really about that social prescribing then. It's person-centred. It's meeting the person on their terms and asking them what they think would make the biggest difference for them. And if there's something available in the community, then it's up to us to get that knowledge of what's out there, all the different resources from community centres to big voluntary groups, to your local residents association, to your local luncheon club, whatever the case might be. And it's to try and connect those people in with those services and resources that's already available within their communities.
And Daniel, how would people make contact with your community care hub?
At the minute, the referral pathway is through GPs and community social work teams. So it is about creating that awareness, and even within the GPs, we're still engaging with the GPs across the city to highlight that this service is now available. So we have been meeting with GPs, and we are getting referrals through, and we've also been engaging with the community social work teams.
Okay, thank you, Daniel. Kirsty, did you want to say? Did you want to make a comment? Sorry, it's Kirsty. We put Kirsty on the spot now.
Just a bit. I was only going to respond to the lady who was saying about places to go. I work for Libraries NI, and it's been great for us to be here today. Again, it's about connecting everything up, because we again would be in the situation where we would offer a wide range of services and activities within our libraries. We have 96 libraries across the province with mobile libraries that offer a variety of services, and what we're finding is it's making the engagement with the people that need them, which is why we're here today, to represent that and to try and, like everybody, link in to make sure that the gap between the services that are being offered are being recommended and are making contact and engagement with the people that would benefit from them most. So that's all I really want to say. Thank you.
Kirsty, thank you. Christina, who is one of our readers today, is interested in making a comment. Christina.
Hiya, I'm just interested that nobody has mentioned like technology, the use of technology or anything like that. I know my dad he's actually better. I'm a technophobe, have no idea whatsoever, but it seems to me it would be brilliant if there was just like one button that you could push whenever you're lonely and there'd be somebody there to go, all right, what about you? Or something like that. And also I just wondered, can you be lonely and not actually know it? You know, I think my father would probably be lonely. I'm sure he would hate me saying this, but in actual fact, he wouldn't admit that he is, and probably, and there are people running around him and all the rest. But he would go to the doctor, and there's no ABR. Yes, no, I'm doing great. Thank you very much. Yeah, my chest's a bit bad, but that's it. There's no way he would ever say, and I'm sure his GP would never pick up that in actual fact, he's sitting in the house waiting for his wife to come home or whatever.
Okay, would anybody on the panel like to say anything? Robert?
Yeah, I think that's a good point in terms of people maybe not being aware of their loneliness. There are researchers who will ask a direct question, are you lonely, for example, in their research. Then there are other researchers who will have like a 10-item questionnaire. So the person might say, well, I'm not lonely, and then the person does the questionnaire, and the researcher analyses it and says, well, actually, they are quite lonely. So that's a way in which loneliness can be captured. So sometimes people are blinded to the fact that they actually are feeling lonely.
Hi, my name is Carrie. I've lived and worked in Belfast for nearly 30 years, but I come from a little town in County Tyrone. So every time I go home, I'm starkly reminded of just how isolated and lonely my neighbours are in amongst the hills of the roving hills of Tyrone. So it would be, and it's been a fantastic morning, I have to say, an amazing morning, but I would love to see how we can roll this out regionally so that we have and can meet. And I think yourself touched on the real needs of older people who are so much more, I feel, much more isolated because they don't have the hubs, they don't tend to have the community groups, they don't have access to a lot of transport. And again, it's just how we, through the Commissioner and other regional, our councils, how we can roll out these recommendations on a regional basis.
Kirsty, thanks. I think we have a point being made over here.
Hi, Eamon. Well done. It's been a brilliant morning, very informative, and lots of thought-provoking things that came out of it. I just wanted to make a wee bit of a plug. You mentioned the Healthy Aging Strategic Partnership and the work that we're doing across the partnership, and Alma reminded us specifically of the work stream regarding isolation and loneliness. But I just wanted to make the point, we have an age-friendly plan which is trying to look at all the issues that affect older people in the city and trying to make the city better for older people so the better quality of life. And isolation and loneliness is certainly a major priority in that plan, and it deals with a lot of issues, including, that we've touched on today, including transport and the infrastructure and all the barriers and enablers to participation. And I'd just like to encourage people, that plan is planned to go out to public consultation at the start of July and will be in the Council's website. And it does provide everybody an opportunity to sort of look at what have been identified as the issues, the gaps, and how the partnership is planning to address those. So it's a real opportunity for people to have a look at that, and if there are gaps in that or things which need more consideration, to feed into that and help to improve that.
Thank you, Damien. Eddie Lynch wanted to say something there. Eddie, the Commissioner for Older People. Eddie, what comments would you like to make?
Thanks. Just a couple of comments to pick up. I think the idea of this social prescribing is quite an exciting development, and it's been in the news a bit this week, and I think that could really be something that really makes a difference. That instead of, I think GPs do have a key role to play in recognising people who are lonely and isolated, and instead of prescribing pills, that they do have, information that they can connect people. I think that's a really exciting development. Another thing that I'm working on with one of Lorna's colleagues in Queen's is the idea of a support visit for everyone once they reach a certain age, and we're talking about 75 possibly as being that age, and that would be that everyone gets a visit from a health worker at a certain age to assess their needs, not just their health needs, but needs around their access to benefits or income, but also in terms of their social needs as well. And that's something that we're doing a bit of work with the Northern Trust on. It's something that has been in place in Denmark and seemed to have worked quite well. So that's just something that we're working on. I just wanted to make a comment as well about technology, and that is an important issue. I think technology has many pros and cons. Many older people I know don't do computers, but many do, and many have an interest but just don't have the confidence to take that step. And I was speaking at an event yesterday by Advice NI, where Dolly here in the front was one of the stars in the video, which showed the impact of older people learning about technology and the practical stuff that you can do online. And you know, I've seen in my own family many examples where older people have been able to connect better with their families, grandchildren across the world, and that makes a big difference to their lives. But I accept that, you know, it's not for everybody. But the final point I would like to make that hasn't been mentioned, I have been concerned about some of the so-called developments in society where many businesses are moving away from face-to-face contact between staff and people. One example that I hear, wherever I go in Northern Ireland, people raise concerns about bank closures, and particularly older people stress how that affects them. And I know it affects more than older people. I moved bank after considering moving bank for about 20 years. I finally got round to it last year, and last month my 3 closest branches closed down in one day. So this affects everybody, but I think removing face-to-face support and contact is a big issue, particularly for those people who aren't online. And other things as well that I think, if you look at supermarkets, I'm sure many of you, you know, that you have seen changes in your local supermarket, where it used to be there was a load of tills with human beings who would sit and serve you, and the supermarkets are moving towards, you know, self-service, using the machines. And many older people say to me that one of the things that helps combat isolation and loneliness is speaking to people when they're out shopping. So I think there are question marks for society, for businesses. I'm pleased that Belfast City Council has signed up to be a dementia-friendly, to make Belfast a dementia-friendly city. Something I've met with officials and the Lord Mayor and High Sheriff on. I think there's lots we can do to get the message across to businesses that they need to think about the changes they're making and making sure that they meet the needs of all their customers now and in the future.
Eddie, thank you. Now, I wanted to ask, would anybody like to make a comment about what it's like to use technology? All right, okay. Well, Grania has been asking to make a comment, so we've got a microphone for Grania. And then we've got a couple of other people who'd like to say a quick word, and then we'll wrap up for lunch.
You talk about computers and the elderly. Once a year, business in the community does a taster day for the over 65s. At one stage in my, when I was doing it with them, I had one woman of 96 able to speak to her family in Australia through Skype for the first time, and she was able to do that again when she went back home because her son had a computer, but her son never showed her how to do it. So yes, technology is very, very important out there because it is the way things are going here. And another thing which I think is awful is those touch numbers when an elderly person phones up instead of getting a voice straight away. That is extremely difficult for anybody, especially, you know, me as well. You know, and if you're an 82-year-old and you're trying to phone up about your electric bill, how are you going to manage to do that if you don't have the ability to do that? You know, it should be, I think those phones should be banned in the first place, but I really think technology is actually, it is the only way to go here.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Grania. Jennifer wanted to make a comment. Grace. Oh.
Just very briefly, because I know Jennifer Stafford from Libraries NI, and I'm here with my colleague Kirsty, and Kirsty's already touched on the various strands that we have within libraries. It was just really resonating with what we were saying across the way here about technology, and on a daily basis in libraries, we can arrange for GOT IT sessions, which are basically introduction to use of computers. It's a very it's a short, sharp introduction, basics, but it gets folk started and where they need to be, and then we can move forward with that as well. We have knit and natter groups as well, which are absolutely fabulous. They're not necessarily for elderly people, but it just happens to be that the majority of people who'd come along would be of that age group, and they're great fun. And new people come along, and they're the whole ethos of everybody counts, and within libraries, it's not a case of coming along and feeling isolated. Anybody new coming in is very much, it's not such a, cliquey type of thing. We also have tea and newspapers. We're open to ideas such as the puzzles. We're libraries, we're 96 of us. We will listen to what people want, and we will try our best to respond to need.
Thank you, Jennifer. We have a comment from over here. We'll take 2 more comments, and then we'll wrap up. So from over here.
My name is Helen Mark. I work for the Belfast Trust. I just wanted to ask the panel, had they any knowledge on the concept of co-housing, and whether or not they felt that there's not a one-size-fits-all, but would that in any way work for people in terms of the concerns around social isolation and isolation generally in older life? Do the panel know about the co-housing?
Okay, Lorna.
I think the short answer, it was outside the remit of this study. So I think one of the things that we would have liked to have looked at and didn't really was the impact on the housing associations themselves with this, with the Hope project. Do you want to say a bit more about co-housing?
I am far from an expert in this. Just I became aware through my adult children who joined a group in Belfast, and the idea of co-housing is that it brings people together who are of all different ages and stages, families, some with families, some living on their own, some people who have remained single all their life perhaps and didn't have children, and people who've been widowed, people like my children who are in their 20s and 30s. And the idea is that they come together and they thrash out and look at other models in Scandinavia, of which there are lots, where there's been purpose-built housing, and people have come together and lived together in a community. Now, there's nothing, as I say, I would suggest that you Google it if you're interested in it, and I think it's a wonderful concept and maybe worth looking at, and there's certainly at least one group in Belfast who are looking at this idea of co-housing and just bringing together people maybe who, as I say, have been widowed, divorced, whatever, who can live together and support one another, and that means you live independently in your own unit, but you can kind of you have somebody there if you run out of a pint of milk, or you're going on holiday and you want somebody to feed your cat. I think it's a great idea. It's not without its issues and problems, but maybe have a look online and see what you think about the notion of it. And there is a group in Belfast who are currently looking at a space for this
okay.
idea.
Helen, thank you very much. If we could get the microphone passed to Linda Armitage here at the front. We're just going to wrap up with a bit of a final comment from Linda. Linda, off you go.
I feel a bit privileged now that it's that. I just wanted, I had a couple of thoughts in my head, and one in particular at the very, very beginning of this morning, I mentioned everybody in the room has a story to tell, and there's something that's always in my head is, I think each of us can take a personal responsibility as to what questions we ask people. And if you want to make time personally to ask a question that actually leads to someone being able to talk to you, and in Northern Ireland we're very good at saying, "Oh, how are you?" and you walk on. So I think it's about how do we pause and ask the right questions, because each of us in this room, we're all here because we're interested. We are all part of the solution. It might be in a little smile and a conversation in the supermarket line. It could be in your work professionally. It could be you as an older person running a group and giving hours and hours of commitment. So I just wanted to put that out there, because it can be very overwhelming to hear all of this today and think, well, what bit can I play? But we can. And just a lot of things, this comes up in my day job in East Belfast Community Development Agency. We're all the time being asked, we're community development workers, how do you know what's out there in your community? Can I just say it's a challenge that I have every day, every hour of the week, because there isn't a simple solution. But again, any professionals in the room, if you work in East, you need to speak to myself, and there's lots of others, we can help you. But take a challenge upon, no matter where you work across the city, particularly if you are a professional, also if you run an older people's group, make the time to actually find out even 2 things. And who do you go to? Well, certainly we can help if you're in East. So I think there is responsibility. So it was really about that. I think this research, Engage with Age, will strive to make it work and be shared. Can I also just say there's another leaflet in your... I just can't, because Eamon and I do this as well. The yellow leaflet, lots of you have mentioned dementia today. We're trying to make East Belfast dementia friendly. We have space on our steering group for more people who are interested. There's lots of things we're trying to do. Please don't ignore this. It complements these research findings greatly. We would appreciate your time. But if you are working, particularly in East, but I can signpost you to other things, especially about getting connected up. But I think this morning it's been lovely to hear from so many people. I think we are left, as I was talking to a couple of the board members of Engage with Age, there are so many more questions in our heads, and I think let's try and get some more answers and see how we can help. But I think, thank you to everybody, it was fantastic, but that's all was in my head.
Brilliant. Okay, and thank you everybody for your comments. It's a very interesting conversation that we hope is going to continue and will help inform everybody. So, before we break up, I'd just like to thank you all for coming along today. There is something that we'd like to draw your attention to, and this is about where to go. This is an initiative that we're working on at the moment. To everybody who's working in the room that might wish to refer someone, it's an open call to make contact with Engage with Age and to see if we can help by signposting people or getting people involved in the work that we are doing. We've initiated a new programme called the PAL Project, which is People Addressing Loneliness. It's group-based work, which is creating sustainable group activities, and we're open for referrals. So we're letting everybody know that just pick up the phone and we'll see what we can do. Martin, who we see there, is the development officer working on the PAL project. So please make contact with us and we'll see what we can do. As the research shows, sometimes we're not the right organisation to help people, but we're very well connected. And one example is if someone is calling us and they're looking for befriending or so forth, Volunteer Now actually coordinate a befriending network. So if we aren't the right individuals to try and help with a referral that comes in, we can try and help match somebody up to an organisation that can help. And I think it is worth also highlighting the work that Age Friendly Belfast is doing and also that Age NI is doing, because we're trying to develop a system where we've got a single point of referral. We've got people here from the fire service, people here from the PSNI today, and those people who are working on the ground are the individuals who see older people on a day-to-day basis. So we're trying to develop a system whereby I think Age NI is becoming the single point of referral to signpost people to see where they can get assistance and also widen their social contacts. A lot of people and organisations helped us with the HOPE programme, with this research and the ongoing work that we do. I would like to thank the readers and the performers who we had with us today, who helped us so ably make our way through all of the research. Thank you to the actors, to the WE group, and to Mary and Glenn and our videos as well. I'd like to say thank you to all of the staff and all of the participants who worked on the HOPE programme, because that work has not finished. It is carrying on and we're continuing with that work. I'd like to thank Eddie Lynch, the Commissioner for Older People, for coming along today, giving us time in your very busy diary. And I'd also just like to say a very warm thank you to our colleagues at Queen's University, to Lorna, Kiva and to Robert as well, for working so hard and contributing. I should say that all of this was possible because of the funding that Engage with Age received from the big lottery, and this is part of the end of this project, where we write up the findings, we submit it to the lottery, but we start to disseminate this information to people who make decisions that affect other people's lives. So today isn't the end, but today is another beginning where we help push this message forward and try and increase the conversations within the sector. Before we finish, the last word today is going to be given to one of our readings. The final word would you please welcome Diane Weiner reading Maybe by Marjorie Jardine and her own poem, If I Ruled the World. Diane.
Maybe by Marjorie Jardine. When you're feeling low, when you're feeling flat, meet up with old friends that make you laugh. For friends are the tonic that works the best, that does not have any side effects. What could be missing? What could be put right? This world with its beauty in nature's delights, a harvest of plenty is there at a touch. Maybe, just maybe, we're asking too much. I have to apologise to all the men in the room, especially the fireman. If I ruled the world, I would be 29, blonde, beautiful, wear size 4 shoes, and have a degree in rocket science. I would be able to read men's minds, but I still wouldn't be able to understand them, and I would disregard every single word that came out of their mouths. In my world, every woman would have the gift of at least one child, regardless of age or status. These children would speak only words of endearment. The F word would be forever banned. They would grow up in a safe and happy environment, free from hurt, hunger, pain, and prejudice. Doctors would never make mistakes. Politicians would make great decisions and create a good life for us all. Every person would be given a piece of land to call their own. Every house would be the same. No keeping up with the Joneses. Mankind would be filled with love and compassion for each and every fellow human being. And finally, if I ruled the world, my hairdresser would never ever say to me, "Take your wee glasses off, love."